in the beginning, what the people that had the first dance company here in Portland were Bonnie and Pat and myself and Bonnie, Pat, myself, Pat, and Jan Dreyer. You've heard about her, who's passed.
Absolutely.
And you should have something about her. And Bonnie she's a great historian of, the video. So she will have snippets of all that old stuff. But as I say, it's in such bad, it's not going to look great because the format is, and then it's old, and some of it wasn't shot professionally. Most of it wasn't shot professionally.
Talking with Joan Finley, she has a treasure trove right now of stuff from Portland Dance Theater and dance in the 1970s and Cirque. Yeah, and she for the purposes of this project, gave me access to some of that footage to be able to edit.
Yeah, she's great too for having sort of maintaining the history.
Yeah, so I was able to talk with her and be able to get some really great footage to work with. So in the beginning, it was a company started.
Well, okay. Are we? You want to?
We're going.
We're rolling. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me start with my own personal. How I got into the scene here. I came to Portland in 1968, and I sought out what was happening in dance, and I found what was at Portland State, which was a new college. It wasn't the university yet. It was Portland State College, and it was only about 8 years old. And so they had one dance person on faculty. Her name was Vonda Carter. You know how to spell that?
Only because I looked it up.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and so she, very, very capable woman, and she was teaching everything at Portland State, which meant she taught folk dance, social dance, that's what college professors do a lot. So anyway, she actually, I think there might have been something before that some group that they got together, but there was no established group when I came. I came and hooked up with her, assisted her in class, took her class, hovered, and so during that, and then that was for 1 year, and then the next year she left. She retired. She shouldn't have, but she did. And I mean, she was young. She was in her 30s. A lot of us, I've retired about, I don't know how many times. I said, okay, and then I'm back, so I don't even say I'm retiring anymore. I'll retire when I die, I guess. So anyway, she passed that job on to me, basically, because we were the PE department, and they didn't know anything, and I knew how to open the cabinets and knew what classes were being taught, and I inherited this job. I had to learn on the job. I didn't have a degree in dance. I had a degree, but it wasn't in dance. And so, because they didn't have those very much those days. So anyway, the first year that I taught, Jan and Judy Patton and Pat Wong, who was then Pat Emmel, and Bonnie Merrill all came and took my advanced technique class, and so we got to talking, and Jan said, let's form a company. I think she was the one that said it. Anyway, we all said, okay, let's do a company. They didn't want to do it at Portland State because they wanted to do it independently. So we did it at Hillside Center. You know about that place? Yeah. Okay, so we rented our little space and set up shop at Hillside Center. And so I went back to part-timing at Portland State and then rehearsing with the company. So that was the first company the first really serious modern, it was called modern dance then, we didn't work, contemporary dance yet. And so we did concerts and wrote grants, and we got a CETA grant. Those were the halcyon days in the dance where you could actually pay people to rehearse. It was minimum wage, but that's more than you get, right?
Totally, yeah.
And so that's when Greg Bielmeyer was my student the first year I was there. So he came on board, and Charles, what is his last name? He passed. Charles.
I've heard other people talk about him, but I don't remember off the top of my head his last name.
You have to include him because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
8 people that we danced with in that period died in the 90s. It was amazing, you know. So, Greg, Charles, and some other of my most advanced students joined up as in this first modern dance company, and the five of us, including Judy Patton, were the choreographers, and but we all danced in the pieces, and that process was quite amazing because it worked as a democratic process. Each, you know, if I said I wanted to do such and such kind of a dance, they were at my service, you know, and I got to call the shots, and then somebody else did this. And then when it came time to put it together for a show, we figured out the program order, and we had to get the musicians and all this stuff. So it was a monumental task that was handled without one supreme leader. It can be done.
Wow. And this was the beginning of Portland Dance Theater.
This was Portland Dance Theater, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So we introduced modern dance to a lot of the schools around, and actually toured in the state and out of state a little bit, you know. So it was, and it was the time when modern dance came to people's attention. Now, on the East Coast, of course, Martha Graham, and, you know, there were all sorts of people who had been working, Merce Cunningham, they'd been working for years, but the West Coast was kind of a waste, or just, you know, hadn't been developed. So these colleges had usually just one faculty person who had to teach everything. They were usually very good, but it was not, it wasn't until the 70s, and had to do with funding. It had to do with, it wasn't RAC then, it was something else. It became RAC when they reorganized at some point a while ago.
Yeah, I'm forgetting too what else it was called before then. But yeah.
And there were all sorts of pockets of funding that could help the thing along. And there were private people who wanted to see this happen. Now, we all had to, the most amount of money went to ballet, although there was no ballet company in town, but Jacqueline Schumacher formed a company eventually, the, what's her called her company? Portland Ballet Company, which I did work for, choreographed. I never danced ballet, you know, performed it, but little choreography with her, and so it was always, you know, the opera, the symphony, and the ballet always got the lion's share, and the contemporary dance took whatever, but it wasn't too bad, you know, because there was quite a bit. And so then, this is where I digress, personally, because what happened was I'm still teaching there full time at Portland State, and it's the 80s, and this is, of course, when all of a sudden American culture stopped being so in love with itself. In other words, the San Francisco hippie revolution, you know, there had been a great focus on American culture, and it was very interesting at that time. But about the 80s, the Latino presence started happening. You know, it was always there, you know, but it started making itself known. And I was from California, so I, of course, knew this from way back. And African, and there were, you'd be amazed. If it weren't for Whitebird, we'd have no modern dance in this town. There used to be a lot of performances down at Keller Auditorium from Africa, various countries in Africa, from Trinidad, from, you know, all this. So there was, but they were just great big companies that came in, gave a show, and left, you know. So, and there were some people, have you heard of Ruby Burns being mentioned? because she taught African dance here. She was the first person. So there were people working, but it was first those classical forms, and then it was the modern dance, and then way down here, in the fringes, was anything that was not American. But in the 80s, things started to change. And my interest, because I had lived overseas, and I was really hooked into international culture. My parents were folk dance teachers, and I had lived in Latin America for years. And so I went to Nancy Matchek. I guess you've heard of her.
I have interviewed her.
Good.
I saw her down in Palm Springs.
Yeah, great. Well, you get around.
I just worked out.
Yeah, no, she's critical to this whole story. So anyway, I went to her and I said, we got to do some international dance here. We had a folk dance that did European and Israeli folk dance, just students, Actually, there was a little performing group too. So anyway, I said, we just have to do better with international dance. I got a grant from the Oregon Arts Commission to go down to Brazil to study Carnaval. Can you imagine? To study Carnaval, how frivolous. But
how amazing. Really
yeah, right, it was great. And so I came back thinking I was still going to... Oh, and see, my corner on the thing here was jazz dance, but I didn't do commercial jazz dance or theatrical jazz dance. I was doing it more from the perspective of concert dance, as in Alvin Ailey, Donald McHale. And so that's where I had developed my niche. But when I went to Brazil and I came back and I said, oh no, I'm still going to do modern dance, but I'm just going to work with... Well, it wasn't long that I wasn't doing anything in modern dance anymore, and I had just completely gone to folkloric. Wow. And of course, that term is controversial, but that's mainly what I want to do, was traditional dance as it really is done in the various Latin American countries. So I then did a lot of traveling to various islands in the Caribbean, Cuba, Haiti, Trinidad, Puerto Rico, and then a lot in Brazil. So I moved more in the direction of, that's what I started teaching, was the folkloric dance. And so then some people said, well, you need to form a company. That's what always happens, Oh, yeah. We don't know what we're doing. The blind leading the blind, but we'll work on it. And what happened was the first company I had was, I did with students. I did some Brazilian stuff, and then I brought. Have you heard of Almiro Aquilino, the capoeira master down here? You know what capoeira is?
Yes.
Well, he has a studio, and I brought him here. I went to Brazil and studied with him, and then he said, I want to come to the United States, so I figured out how to have him teach at Portland State, and then he stayed. He's still here. And so you should interview him.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's having his 30-year anniversary. You got to attend that. He's having his 30-year anniversary.
Oh, cool.
I'll work on it.
Yeah, if you got some information about it, feel free
there's
to
a date
send
when
it my
he's going to
way.
have some kind of thing. Cool. So anyway, I tried as much as possible to connect with all the people in the community who were actually from that culture. And then there were students who were interested in it. And in terms of a lot of the Latinos, there were people who had been here for generations maybe, but they still wanted to do more of the folkloric thing. And of course, in the case of Mexican Chicanos here, they have a whole long history of folkloric dance. So practically all Chicanos learn the folkloric dances, just like Jews often learn the Israeli dances, So, and that's of course what I started tuning into is, all these, it's happening, there's the Nordic thing, something or other, and so that's what got me interested in saying, okay, these culturally diverse forms and how they relate to the people who are of that culture and how they relate to the general population. Flamenco is another thing. There were right now. There's not as much flamenco as there used to be because there were a few people who really could do it, and they also had teaching jobs. It always comes down to you can't fund anything unless you have a job at a university that gives you space and facilities and a salary to make it happen, and then you get your students, and it goes from there. And then you can bring in guest artists, because that's what was really fun. Is when I started bringing people from Cuba and and I have a tape here of Los Muñequitos. Brought the whole group. First time they'd ever been to the United States. This was back in '91, I think. Got a grant from RAC to do that.
Nice. And was this part of the PSU dance season?
Yeah.
Sweet, yeah.
No, it was not part of the PSU dance season. The dance season pretty much. No, we did some international stuff, but there was Canadian groups, European, because it had to be modern, And what I was interested in bringing was the people who were the folkloric groups from those countries, because that's what I was teaching, and that's what I was trying to develop, is a part of the program at PSU that would be devoted to world dance, traditional, and contemporary and popular too, And so, because the clubs, I also have always been somebody to go to the salsa clubs and all, so that's a thriving culture right now. You know anything about that?
A little bit, and it looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's getting more and more, and what's happened with, ballroom dance in general, social dance in general is really exploding right now, and what happened with that is that men who, for many years, straight men did not get involved in dance, period. And then when there was any kind of dance happening, it tended to be a concert dance form, not a social dance form. People, hippie thing, you just sort of gyrated around and didn't have any form, and so people lost interest because it wasn't a very interesting dance. So the social dance thing exploded onto the scene with salsa, with tango, with some of these other forms that I've been talking about. Ethnic dance is another term that,
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. But we know in general what that's talking about is a different perspective than white American, So anyway, that started happening everywhere, and it was happening, in part at Portland State, but it started happening. Mary came, she taught it. We all went through Portland State at some point, But she had her own thing, started Conduit. That's been a great center for contemporary dance for years. And I'm probably leaving something out, but you've probably already covered it or will.
It's all right, and it doesn't have to be a total comprehensive thing. We can take some time just to really explore a few key points in some more depth, really whatever seems important to bring up, and it's there is no wrong. There's no
Yeah, you can always edit out.
Yeah.
So anyway, I also, as far as curriculum, we started having a dance major, and that meant that somebody had to teach theory courses as well as studio courses. And fortunately, I got most of them not because I had a bunch of degrees in anthropology. I wish I did, but I'd always learned a lot about it. I actually minored in, So I was teaching dance history, dance of various, Latin American cultures or Caribbean or whatever. So that. And of course, we also had on the curriculum, we had all the theory classes and the composition, choreography, student dance company. So
the company we keep.
Huh?
The company we
keep. Yeah. So we had just everything at Portland State. We weren't the only ones that had it, but we had a range of stuff at Portland State. Until they cut the department. You heard about that sad story.
Yeah, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective. Like, what was going through that experience like?
Horrific. It was just horrific. and it was not the worst for me as it was for the others. I was at that time not old enough for early retirement, but I was close to it. So, and plus I was moving into interests that there were other things I could do in dance. But for those who were at the height of their power as performers, it was devastating. You know, they had to retrench into other careers. A lot of them just fell through the cracks. But, well, they've kept on, you know, doing little projects, choreographing theater or something or other. You know, nobody ever quits dancing once you get the bug, you know. But it was really just awful. And mostly because we knew we had something really good, and they stopped it. And I wouldn't, if I didn't think it was good, I wouldn't say that. But we had, first off, we had a fabulous working relationship among us. There were just no conflicts within even before we knew we were on our way out. We just knew how, and Nancy was very skilled as a chair. She kept the chair all those years. You're supposed to pass it around, and nobody wants to be chair, you know, because they have to deal with all these people, you know, fighting, and that none of that happened. Everybody, you know, there were disagreements, both aesthetic and personal, but it was always each person got to develop her and his. Not very many hises, but there were a few, and that we got to the flower in that which we were interested in.
Wow.
So when I told her that I wanted to develop diverse stuff, she literally said, "Why do you want to do that?" And I said, "Because I think it's important. First off, I like it, and second off, that's most important for me. Is I've always been a selfish, you know, dancing for me has got to be fun, you know, so." But also, I said, I think that's the important direction that we're going. We are our culture is expanding out to consider the rest of the world. And a few years later, she came to me and she says, "You know, you were on the money." So I always got the good part of the deal, and some of the people really got screwed. And you heard about Vest Doliner, right?
I don't think so.
Okay, you got to know about him. He was part of the Portland Dance Theater. He started out as a trapeze person or a circus or something or other, and he was in ballet primarily. He came on to the faculty at Portland State as a ballet dancer, and so he was our regular male faculty member, and then we tried to bring in male dancers for summer sessions and special sessions so that there would be more of a male presence. And Vest stayed there for, you know, many years, and he died he was one of the other
in the 90s of AIDS.
Charles, oh, it starts with a B. Oh, you got it, because Charles, I don't know that Charles ever taught there, but Greg ended up teaching there, and Vest taught many years there, even before we sort of fell apart, and we had others. Benny Bell, did you ever hear of Benny Bell? Yeah, absolutely. He taught there a little bit, and so a lot of the men had just adjunct positions there, and there were a lot of female adjuncts too. The only full-time faculty that got booted in the big boot was Nancy, myself, and Judy. I think were the only full-time faculty there. We had a lot of adjuncts, and we all went and went our separate ways or had to go take another career, and it was just so. And the space, the Shattuck Hall. Have you been to Shattuck? No, you wouldn't be to Shattuck Hall.
It's a computer lab.
It's a computer lab.
Yeah.
Have you seen pictures of the way it looked before?
I have, yeah. It was really nice.
Well, when I first came there, it was a junky old room with a linoleum half torn up room. Oh. And it was just had chairs piled in the corner, and it's where the folk dance classes were held because they had to wear shoes, and we didn't wear shoes in our nice studio, you know. So they were over in Shattuck Hall, and then Nancy got the money to get this wonderful renovation, and I've been in a lot of dance studios in my life, and a lot of beautiful dance studios, but this was tops. Natural light, a stage where you could have the performers there and the audience down here, small audience, and dressing rooms, and it was just a perfect space. And they fired us, and then they turned that space into computer lab. That was unbelievable. Just unbelievable. So, you know, I will never forgive them.
Yeah. Pardon? What year was that?
They told us in 92. We didn't know anything about it. Although it was not a total surprise because they said, well, we got to cut something. So they had a general faculty meeting of everybody, and they said, 2 departments have to go. No, it was 3 departments. It was journalism, film, and dance. Can you believe it? Wow. The 3, you know, especially journalism and film is where everybody's working these days. You know, it's just like clueless. Oh, I think they asked philosophy too. And a lot of it just had to do with, you know, what we were expensive. Although, with the exception of philosophy, the others took a lot of money to have the floors and the spaces and the studio and the equipment and
production. Production is expensive.
Yes. So anyway,
what year was the beginning when you first came in and Vonda was there? And
that was 68.
68, and then at that point it wasn't a major, right? There was still a long road.
A long road to get to a major. We didn't get the major until late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
And that was our downfall in a way, because they one of the things that gave them excuse for booting us is you don't have enough majors. This is because we had some morality. We told students, with few exceptions, we told students, don't major in dance. You'll never make a living. Get it. They said, well, you're making a living at it. We said, well, there's just a few of us, you know.
Yeah.
It's. So they would often get a minor or a certificate. The certificate was a very nice program that gave them then a second sort of almost a major that when they went out to teach, if they had some kind of a degree teaching, they could teach. So anyway, it worked out well, but they said, well, you don't have enough majors. Well, I'm not so sure they wouldn't have asked us anyway. There were a lot of dynamics going on there.
Yeah.
Including, I can say it now because I'm retired, sexism. We were the only department that was all women except for one gay man. And so we were expendable. Now this is, I have nothing to prove this is except, who was one of the guys that would say something about, I can't prove it, but I know it's so,
Yeah.
So anyway,
I think that's while it's your opinion, it's an important opinion to bring forward. And if nothing else, to say it's here was a program comprised entirely of women, and it was one of the few programs that got cut. That is a fact.
Yeah.
And that you don't have to be too sharp to connect those dots.
Right. And so what happened then with dance at Portland State is the World Dance, so there was always a student allotment of funds for out of the incidental fee. The students ran their own dance program, and oftentimes they simply helped us fund what we were doing. But they did other things too. They did some ballroom dance and things the students really wanted, and I don't know what all they did. But anyway, when we closed in 94, they gave us 2 years to graduate out our majors, and in 94 there was no faculty in dance anymore. So the World Dance they changed the name of the dance committee or whatever it was to the World Dance Office, and they started funding. And this was because the students who were taking that over were interested in world dance. Oh, wow. And so then we had a lot of, so that part of the
I'm sorry, I'm just want to check to make sure that I'm getting all this right and that it's recording well. It's hard to be interviewer and camera operator.
Yeah, it is.
It's too many jobs.
Yeah.
But so it is. Yeah, you're looking good. You're framed right. The exposure's still great. We're all good.
So so the World Dance Office hired several of us and other people to teach dance for a few years, and the rules, when a university completely banishes a program, they can't have any of that subject matter taught for 10 years. Now, there was a woman named Mary King who is an economist of great renown. She's wonderful. She lives right here in town. She's a good friend of mine now. She came to Portland State from the Bay Area and took, I think that might have been her first job. Anyway, she took a job in the econ department because she had heard about our great dance program. She got there and there was no dance program, and so she was powerless to do anything about it for 10 years. But then in 2004, that was 1994. Okay, 2004. As chair of the econ department at Portland State, she put in a little dance program that included I taught the studio courses, or the lecture courses, and then she hired various adjuncts for the studio component. So we had a little mini program there, and it was packed with students because the students, they wanted to take dance. Everybody, they always want to take dance, but they could never get credit for dance. Well, these were credit classes that they could take in dance. So we worked up, and it was like starting over again. We worked up to have a little minor in dance and all that. They cut that program. But they did put in what exists now, which is a dance program there that you know about that. So what they did was, ours was too focused on culturally diverse dance, and they wanted to have something that was modern dance, and so they did that, Oh, wow. And so it is what it is, and I'm glad there's something in dance there, and they do have some good things going there. Terry Mathern is great. Of course, she was our product at Portland State, and then she became conduit, and now she's teaching at Portland State. So, this is all incestuous. We've gone round for generations. We've all grown old together.
What are some of the changes that you noticed after '94 when the dance program went away? How did that have an effect outside of PSU, or did it just kind of disappear quietly?
Nothing was quiet about it from our perspective. And mostly it was funding. Because Portland State had and a lot of it's not dollars thrown to dance, it was space and faculty. I, as a full-time professor, got 1/4 of my time was supposed to be spent in creative or scholarly research or whatever. In my case, I did a lot of it in research because I became a dance ethnologist and went off and studied and published and all that stuff. But for, let's say, Terry Mathern, well, she wasn't full-time, but let's say Judy Patton.
Yeah.
Nancy did it in administration. Judy Patton did her 1/4 time in choreography. So that meant that there were just people didn't have to hire a choreographer to do a show, and they had somebody with great experience, and we'd negotiate to get the theater and all that. So we got a lot of perks out of it that were not just sort of like cash in hand, but if you really added up, that was a tremendous amount of money that was spent that benefited the community.
Yeah.
So that when that disappeared, when Shattuck Hall was no longer there, when Lincoln Hall, was greatly reduced in what they would do for dance, it was devastating. And in this way, one of the most important things about a dance in any culture is the education of the youth. education of audiences, development of youth and audience. So what happened? The technical level went down. The audiences went down. You have to have all that, and that's what we had right at that beautiful heyday. Is we had so many trained dancers. They were everywhere, and we had space, and we had audience willing to come and butts and chairs. This is really important. So the students who went through the program there, maybe they didn't ever do anything professionally in dance, but they came and paid their money to see dance. That diminished. Now people have done, valiant efforts, and Conduit has been, really good about keeping the fire lit, and others. Men, okay, talking back to when we said we didn't encourage anybody to major in dance, but when men came along, we said, you can major in dance. You have a career in dance. Well, in fact, he was so practical, he went and got a business degree. But, people like that, there were a few people that we'd say, okay, you can get a career in dance. And there was great advantage there to being a man, because there's so many more women in dance than men. So, and of course you have to interview Pat Wong. I mean, you've interviewed Carla, so you know about the Reed thing,
Right.
And you can get more of her perspective because she goes way back before Carla. She goes back, right when she never taught. See, she was part of the original Portland Dance Theater, but she never taught at Portland State. She went over to taught at Reed. So she nabbed the Reed job. There was another woman there, Judy Massey. Have you heard about her? Yeah. So
yeah.
Judy and Pat taught at Reed, and I and Judy taught at Portland State. And Bonnie taught at Portland State, although she never did full time, but she did a million choreography project. Very active.
How does Jan Dreyer fit into this puzzle?
Okay, Jan, after several years of, you have all the right questions to lead me.
I try. Thanks.
So she, we had this democratic group, back to the Portland Dance Theater. But Jan really had her own vision, and it was becoming apparent that she wanted to do her own company. And so, I can't remember the year when Cirque was formed, but you would know. And so she broke off and formed her own company, and that's when Joan Finley and
Greg, I think, was Greg part of Portland Dance Theater or Cirque, or he was
both.
in the mix,
both,
in there,
Uh-huh.
Okay. But that's when Joan came in and kind of that next generation, so to say.
So she had her own studio, the one up there on Morrison and 16th.
Yeah, I've got some video from that studio,
Yeah, so she ran that operation, and so that's how she fits in, but she's a very independent person,
How did she get involved in Portland Dance Theater originally?
Walked into my class with the others. That was when she, Pat, Bonnie, Judy, came as my students in my advanced technique class. But obviously they had great experience, So afterwards we sat down and they said, let's do a company. I said, sounds good to me.
Wow.
So that's...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. When they were still students or after they
graduated?
Well,
no, they were all... No, they'd
they
all graduated, and they were... they were... Judy was pregnant with her first child, so that was her project that year.
Yeah.
Bonnie had arrived not so long, here. She hadn't been here that long. Jan, I think she just came from Bennington College or something, and Pat had just graduated from Portland State. So we'd all danced, but we hadn't been part of a company that I know of until the Portland Dance Theater. So it's just, when I think about 5 women who we were crazy to think we could do this, because it was like and that was the beauty of it, is that we didn't have that many models to follow, and so we just put our heads together and how we could make this work, And we were lucky that we came along right when we filled the niche, when the granting agencies were looking around to say, what kind of dance is going on in Portland?
Yeah.
We said,
us.
They'll show you.
Yeah.
Right.
Would it be fair to say if those ladies that had been your students at Portland State, if there hadn't been a dance program at Portland State for them to study at, then there wouldn't have been the knowledge in those people to start a dance company, or the interest to start a dance company?
No, because they already had plenty of knowledge. They took, they signed up for my advanced class. It was obviously, so it was kind of just serendipitous that we all found each other. But
so they weren't actually like enrolled at PSU. They just, as students,
they
just enrolled in your advanced class because they were looking for a dance technique class, and at the time that was what it was in Portland. There was no like Body Vox or Northwest Dance Project to go and take class at. So you came to PSU. Interesting.
Yeah. We were the only game in town as far as modern dance.
Huh. Wow. Let's change the subject just a little bit. And something that you've touched on was dance in the 90s in Portland and the effect of AIDS on a lot of the population of dancers. And I know that Bonnie did a piece, and this influenced her work a lot. And I think that's something that has, at least this generation of dancers in Portland, has probably left a lot of their consciousness about what that was like. Would you be willing to take a few words about just how the dance community was impacted and reacted during that time?
This was the same time we were getting out of Portland State. We were losing our careers, and we were losing our friends and our people who danced in our dances. We were going to memorials every other month. It was horrific. It was it was really a dark time, but it was also a time for those of us who'd been around a while that we had to keep going, because we were mid-career, so we had to figure out some way to make this work, and some didn't. Some ended up doing very little in dance, but most did something, went on, kept on keeping on,
You all right? I know I asked a really hard question, and that's...
Maybe that's why my coughing started, yeah.
Yeah, and that's totally...
Tells more than my words.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a really dark time. And the fact that at that point there was no light at the end of the tunnel. Now we can look back and say, well, it was a temporary dark time, but things got better. At that time, it looked like it was just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. So, for myself personally, I actually had Scott Bryant had been a dancer at Portland State, a fabulous student, and then he went on to be a professional dancer in a company that went all around the world and all. And he came back already, with AIDS, and danced with my Cuban group and died. So I had a personal connection as well. But at that point, I had gone into the ethnic thing, and I had hooked up with the Latino community here and the Cuban community, and so those men were not as impacted as much. They were straight, and so for me personally, it was not as, it was just different, but for those who, I don't know, because I wasn't someone who was having the people who were in my dances dying all the time. Just Scott was the only one. But it was just terrible, artistically and emotionally, and
I felt like everything kind of came crashing down all at the same time. I bet the structure of making dance and the people who make dance and
the funding. I mean, and it all comes. Once again comes down to money. That we just felt like we were being abandoned by. And of course, for me,
abandoned by Portland State and the city, or just in what way did the city abandon dance in the 90s?
The funding went way down. Not just the city, it was the state too, the Oregon Arts Commission, and So I mean, they were having their problems. It wasn't they didn't want their funding to go down, but the state, the society, was not supporting the arts, and in particular they were not supporting dance, and a big part of that, I think, was that they were connecting dance with HIV. And I really, once again, I don't have any proof, but I know it's true. That it was just like, and so this was
during Reagan's years too. Is that? I'm kind of
yes.
So this was all part of Reaganomics and like cut the NEA and cut.
Yes.
So okay.
Exactly.
Do you think that mentality affected the dance and other arts programs at Portland State being cut during that time, or was that just kind of like, we need to get rid of something, these departments have the right numbers, or some other factor? Was there a greater cultural climate that was in play here? And of course,
I wouldn't stick my neck out to say that they fired us because of HIV. I will say, I did say already that we had a faculty of all women and one man who was HIV. So be that as it is, and I don't know whether let's say if HIV hadn't happened, they might have the history might have been fairly similar. So I can't really make the connection there.
Yeah.
But there might be one.
Wow. This is all amazing, fantastic stuff. So you started teaching in the 1968. Mm-hmm. That was a phenomenal year, wasn't it?
Well, actually, 1968. Yeah, that was a pretty nice.
Yeah.
I came from from San Francisco.
Oh wow.
And that, I have to say, was really jump back. I tell you, I had such a lucky life. I came to Portland literally with a rucksack on my back, long hair, on my way to Canada, because I had left the Bay Area at the height of all that, saying, there's something wrong here and I just want to go off and be in a part of a commune. This was big, And so I'm going to go to Canada because they're going to be giving away land and all that, I got as far as Portland, and when I fell into this dance scene here, I said, well, got nothing to lose, I'll stay here. And so then, of course, I ended up having a career here because I fell in at the right time. Now, what did Portland State want with some long-haired hippie, What they wanted was they had a faculty of old white males, and they knew that and they had a student body that was rioting, was objecting to this. So the fact that I was a young hippie teaching this dance stuff, it was like, well, we'll keep her on because it kind of gives us something, I really think that had a lot to do with why they put up with me, because they really just put up with me.
Wow.
Because I was bringing in all this stuff, and I had old white male faculty members tell me, why do you do all that black dance?
Oh.
That wasn't all these old white males told me, but or said to me, or asked me. But that's I said because they dance. That's why. Because it is dance. That's why I do it.
Were there and in the late '60s when you arrived, were there other modern dance happening in Portland? Like I've heard about the Reed summer program. Was that ongoing at that time?
Yes, and it was excellent. We all went every day of it, and it was great. So Reed had something, and I think that's about it. A little bit was going on up at, no, not back then. Lewis and Clark, not really. That was a little bit later. They started up a little bit of stuff. There were people, at all these schools, there were people who wanted to do stuff, but they weren't given the support. We were the only ones, and Reed, only ones who managed to convince the faculty that this was what they ought to be doing. Mm-hmm. And of course, that happened until 1992, and they decided they didn't need us either.
Yeah. What was the Reed summer program like? I absolutely will connect with Pat Wong, and I think that she's going to give me some great perspective on this. But from your involvement in that, what was your experience with the Reed summer
fabulous. I was just a student there, but we always culminated in a performance and all. And so and there were great teachers there. The best, from the East Coast, So I remember Armgard von Bardeleben taught Graham technique. And that was so much fun because she taught us a fabulous dance from Night Journey, and I got to perform Graham's choreography. I had actually studied with Graham back east earlier when I was going, to college. I went to the summer program they had at Connecticut College. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, they had Leslie Watanabe there was fabulous. I can't even, it's a long time ago, but they always had good teachers and culminating in many activities, and everybody, you made it a point to go to that workshop every summer.
Mm-hmm. Are there, how did going to those workshops influence or affect you? Like what was some things that you took away or were able to do because of that experience?
Well, in the case of the Graham technique, I'd had a little bit before, but I was very influenced by that, and just got a lot stronger, as a result of it. And Leslie Watanabe, he's from Ailey, so there was that, and there was the man from the Jose Limon Company, who became the curator of the Limon films and stuff. What's his name? Oh, how could I not?
That's fine. Don't worry too much.
It's just so awful to forget these wonderful people's names. Danny Lewis. And so he taught Limon, and that was a great influence on all of us. And they would have lecture dams and show films, and it was just everybody went there every day all summer, for the 6 weeks that they did that. Mm-hmm. So that was a really successful program.
Do you know when that program started? Was it in the 50s, the 60s? And again, Pat is the person I know to connect to on this.
I think it started after I came.
Oh, okay. So
I can't remember the exact year, but I think it was after I had been there for a few years they started having that. I might be wrong on that.
Okay. But around the same time when dance was starting to kind of percolate at PSU, the summer program was also percolating at Reed. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And like you said, it was just kind of the right cultural climate at that time. Like funding was available, interest was available, people were coming together with interest. Mm-hmm. And so things just aligned in the right way at the right time.
I know. I cannot believe that I had such luck in life, that I've just gone from one thing to another, just escaping some kind of hell that could have befallen, and instead had all these great opportunities. Because I was always a pretty good dancer, but I came with not nearly enough training, and I didn't have the perfect classic body or anything. I was much thinner. There I am in. I guess you got your camera there, but. Those are my modern, those are actually when I did jazz dance, I used the progressive jazz people. So that one on the left, that was done to John Coltrane's Naima. It was a trio.
Wow.
And that one on the right was done to Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, who is, I can't believe I forget these names. Anyway, all those heavy jazz people from that era was the music that I used. I didn't use frivolous or light. I also used some pop stuff.
You are beautiful.
What happened?
No. That's and so this taken in the
in a
60s,
performance
70s,
at Lincoln Hall,
or?
and that was taken at the performance. I did a show in 1979, and then I did another one in 1980, and those were the two years that those two shots were taken.
Wow, nice.
And another person, I suppose you've heard about, Peter West.
A little bit, but not enough.
Well, Vonda Carter told me she was really good. And she would just give me all this insight, because she only got to teach beginners, studio classes. She never got to teach a theory class. But she would wind off to me all the time, and I was all ears. She said, because I wanted to learn how to choreograph. I'd been choreographing, but, wasn't very good. And so she said, for concert dance, 50% of it is lighting. That seems a little out of balance.
Yeah.
But when I started working, and she always insisted upon getting some lights. I said, oh, who needs lights? Just, no. The lighting is everything, because it's a visual art, And so, fortunately, we had the good fortune to have Peter West come and do our lighting. And Peter is an artist of lighting dance. Other things too,
Sure.
He is a master.
And a very generous spirit, right?
Yes.
He has, over the years, donated a lot.
Yes.
Did he pass away recently? No, he's still around and kicking? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. No.
Yeah, he does a lot of theater these days. Have you heard about Milagro, Miracle Theater?
Yeah.
He does some lighting for that group, and of course that's way below his. He asks big prices. He does industrials, and he has big prices, for his work. And he goes and they don't pay very well, but they pay. But he just says, I just love working here and it's a little dinky theater with limitations and everything, but he just loves the kind of work they do is just something that interests him,
So he supports it.
And it's theater, it's not dance, but he's a lighting person. Anyway, we were so lucky to have him, and that, oh my God, the lighting, we'll even see the lighting on those shots, and he would do a set. The set for this piece to the right here, I told him I wanted. He would just. I would just say what I wanted, and I couldn't believe he would do it, and it would be so simple sometimes. I said I wanted the feel. This is a dance of sort of the alienation of the city, and so I want it to seem urban, but I don't want set pieces or anything like that. We kept things kind of clean, and he had a kind of a scrim and a band of light across when I describe it, it doesn't sound like anything. But it was just this ambience. And I just...
And powerful.
Yes, you'd step into that space with that lighting, and you were into whatever that character was. And that was always the way it was. It was just masterful.
So Vonda Carter said 50% is lighting. Is Vonda Carter around in Portland?
I believe she is. I have not seen her for some years, but I hear that she is somewhere.
Would you have any sense of how I could contact her for this documentary, or have you lost touch with her?
I haven't seen her in years, and I don't know how well she is.
Sure.
So I don't know what the story is there. I'm trying to think who does.
It's okay. If you think of it, let me know. It's it's a process to kind of track down all these different people, and now I'm kind of in this realm of people that don't really know me or what I do. So it's kind of like, hey, a friend told me that you're somebody important to connect with. But...
Well, her daughter used to run. I think she still has a store that sells cheeses and wine or something. Up there at the Uptown Shopping Center on Burnside and 23rd, I think it was called Elephant.
Oh yeah, Elephant's Deli on
She used to own that establishment.
Wow.
So you might just go in there and see if she still owns it, and if she, can hook you up with her mother. But be aware that her mother may not be capable of an interview. I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay. Do you know her daughter's name?
I can't remember. Anne, I think.
Anne Carter? Or that would be her maiden name.
Her maiden name, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
It would be worth it. I mean, if, as I say, if Vonda can do this, because Vonda was brilliant, beautiful, body to die for, and why she quit dance, it's just like, oh no. But in a way, and she started going into more dance therapy kinds of things. So and dance for Jerry, back when she was still young, she went into dance for older people and that kind of thing. So that became her dance as therapy became her approach to it. But she had all the goods to do. She choreographed and she could dance, and she just got sidetracked out of Portland. She never taught again in a university. I have so many friends who, if they ever got including all of us at Portland State, if you ever lost your university job, it was very difficult to continue, and probably a lot of that might have been psychological, but it was also just practical. That universities sort of hire somebody, and then as long as you do a decent enough job, they keep you. And then when you go out there aren't that many jobs around, and then who are you, this rather aging person, And so so many people I know, including some people who, I won't say this because it'll be too easy to track who it is, but it's fine. The effect on aging dancers of having to diminish their careers is often very tragic. Myself, I'm happy as a clam. I go out dancing salsa. I got to tell you about all these costumes here.
Do.
What do I do these days? The silliest stuff in the world, but I love it. So it's not silly at all, really. No. It's very heavy. I'm
just going to make sure that we're getting in everything here so that we can really see what you're talking about as we're changing our focus. Beautiful.
So I actually, there's a woman here named Freyla Merencio, who is a Cuban dance artist, fabulous. And I take class with her, and she does shows every now and then. And so that's this show where I got to dance with this fabulous Cuban man. Can you see it is in the frame there? And so this was last year. So I'm still doing it. But I'm doing the rumba for older ladies, so appropriate. So then Donna Offinger runs Center Space. Have you heard about that?
Yes, but I haven't interviewed her.
She doesn't do modern dance. She does a lot of hip-hop kinds of things, and she does Brazilian and Cuban brilliantly. Cool. So you should check her out, because she's one of them that's, keeping the flame by running a business and having all kinds of dance happening in the studio with some other teachers besides herself, of course.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that I started doing a few years ago, when I first went to Brazil, I always seem to be the first one to go to some of these places. I was the first person to go to Brazil from the dance community here, and came back and just was all in a flame with Brazilian dance. And now, of course, there's all sorts of people here. So they probably would have come if I hadn't gone, but I was the first, They come back and say, that's some good shit, And so then I went to Cuba. And wow. Same thing. I came back and I went, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for all my life. And so then I started doing the Cuban thing here, and so then other people came. Some were my students and some were not. Some other people came because this was inevitable whether I had done it or not, because this is where the society is going.
Right. You just happened to be the person to say, oh, hey, my antenna is picking up that this is out here.
It was like when I went to Nancy, I said, I think we should do diverse dance. She says, why should you do that? I says, I had my antenna out, you know. So, yeah, oftentimes I was the first, but I wasn't necessarily the reason why it became what. Would have happened anyway.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, we all know about Brazil, you know, samba in Rio. You know a lot more after this year with the Olympics and everything. So anyway, that's been going on for years. Well, there are several different carnival forms in Brazil. And one of them is in the state of Pernambuco, which is, if you look at the map of Brazil, you know that great point that goes out there. Uh-huh. Recife is the town that's in Pernambuco right out there.
Oh, wow. So just about as far east in Brazil as you can go.
Far east. And then it also happens up toward Amazon, too. It's a form called maracatu. And maracatu is a very strange form because they have all these references to the colonial era and all these costumes. I mean, this is colonial stuff, you know, and they carry dolls.
Wow.
You know, with this, this is the doll I'm going to carry. My outfit is green this year. Every year I do a different outfit I do everybody's outfits. And so, they wear all this combination of Europe and Africa, but it's the sensibility of it is very African resistance. It is not, you know, oh, we love being slaves or anything like that. Right. I walked out of camera, didn't I?
Yeah, that's all right.
It's definitely maintaining the African tradition. Uh-huh. So even while the symbols look strange to the rest of us, because why would you do all that? I have people say, well, why do they want to do the colonial stuff, you know? Well, it's a long story, but they do. And so at first I sort of, you know, I was down in Rio, and then I was in Bahia in Brazil, and so Pernambuco and that maracatu looked like, oh my gosh, you know, all these colonial costumes. Well, I'm telling you, I got seduced into it bit by bit, and so there's a man who came here to live a few years ago named Beto Guimarães, who is a Brazilian dancer from that region, and he co-taught with me at Portland State. In 2007, I taught my last course at Portland State, and I co-taught with him because it was Brazilian dance. He's a great teacher and very knowledgeable of his subject. And so he and some drummers in town formed a group called Maracatu PDX. And so, though they have, and I love that group because, for one thing, there are a lot of women drummers in that group.
Oh,
and
nice.
Female, you know, women a lot of times get sidetracked in drumming. And a lot of that is most of them don't have the skills of a lot of the guys. But anyway, they encouraged the women, and they have a lot of female drummers. They have a lot of male drummers, and they have Brazilians, and they have Mexicans, and they have Cubans, and they have white Americans, and they have black Americans, and they have men, and they have women. They have straight and gay. And our big event in Maracatu PDX is the Gay Pride. So all these now they're performing elsewhere too. I say they because I'm not touring this year, but. The Maracatu PDX has a lot of different threads, but our big event is to do Gay Pride. And so we've been doing it now for several years, and that's what these costumes are about.
Fantastic.
And I have to talk about this one in terms of how resistance comes in. This is a glitzy thing, you know, it's worn by a man, and the headdress is over there. Let me just bring the headdress over.
Yeah.
You want to just because this, I want now. Beto has one other caboclo costume already, but when I saw this costume, I said I want to make a caboclo costume. It has to be worn by a man, and it's. You know about Do you know about the Mardi Gras Indians in New Orleans?
I don't know.
They are African Americans who dress as Indians with the war bonnets and all that.
Okay, wow.
And they represent, historically, they had to represent Indians in order to represent resistance, in order to not catch hell.
Huh.
This is parallel in Maracatu. These are African Brazilians,
Okay.
but they parade, and also it has to do with the idea that the Native Americans have some leg up on magic.
Okay.
You know? So anyway,
Sure.
this is the top, this is the
Oh,
bottom
dang.
of this caboclo
Wow.
costume. And I didn't make this. One of the members of the Maracatu said she volunteered to help me, and I didn't know how to use a glue gun, so this is her, the head is hers. So anyway, that's what's happening on June 19th in downtown. Do you know about the Gay Pride?
I do, yes. Yeah. It's a great thing. It's so
It
nice
is,
that
yeah.
the city's doing that.
Are you going to be part of it?
Probably not. I don't have any definitive plans.
Well,
but...
then find us.
Okay, that sounds
We
good.
tend to be kind of toward the end of the the processional, and we come down with. It gets bigger every year. We have the drum corps is 30 people maybe, coming from California, Seattle, everywhere. And then there's some dancers. Beto has his students dancing some, dance for the form. And then there's the fine ladies coming along and the caboclos coming along. And when I say fine ladies, they're not fine, but they were the older women who wear these costumes and carry these dolls and wear these hats and stuff. And then there's the king and queen of Congo, and they always have to be black. And we do have two magnificent people doing that. And they wear costumes that actually Beto brought back. I fixed them up a little bit, and I have them buried here, but these are actually costumes from Brazil, and these headdresses. And then somebody carrying a great big parasol, rainbow colors. This year we're doing the god of Brazil, that is of the Candomblé religion, who is of the rainbow. And Serpent and the Rainbow, that movie. And so, and he's going to be carrying the parasol because he's very tall.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, it's a great show.
Nice. And certainly what beautiful costumes, and so lovely to see how this arc of your interest is continuing into this beautiful format, and that it just that you found so much life to continue in with what your work is, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, I can't say that. Sure, it really bothers me that when I go to dance classes that I have to sit out half the stuff and I'm so limited in what I can do. So, I would love to, I have dreams of doing grand jetés, and all that. But just as far as feeling like I'm part of something that is dance and educational as well. I feel like,
Absolutely.
by the fact that we're doing Maracatu here and the fact that I can educate people about it, makes me continue being the professor.
Or it's just an extension of what your interest is,
right.
And your interest both with different forms of folk dance, but also with being able to share that with other people. And that's a great thing.
Well, you can come down to the Gay Pride with your camera and take a bit of us as we go by.
That would be cool. That would be really cool. See that in action.
June 19th.
Okay,
June 19th.
Good. I'll check my calendar and see what's there. That feels really great for an interview. That was a lot of very wonderful information. Before I turn off the camera, is there anything else that feels like is worth talking about? I don't know if that's more plenty, but if there's any other thoughts,
I don't think I've left anything out. Of course, I've left all sorts of things out.
Yeah.
It's not pertinent to your subject, which is the performed dance, and I guess just to say that performed dance, to me, when I first went to Brazil and I was in the Grand Parade in Rio, that's a performance. There were 3,000 performers and 100,000 in the audience. I thought, it'll never be this big. And this is not maybe the most artistic thing I've ever done, but it is certainly the biggest.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, when you examine other cultures, you find that presenting dance means different things, and it has many ramifications, and so carrying the art form or the religion out into the street is kind of a thing that goes on, and it's even going on now.
Yeah.
Do harmonica too in the street.
Great point that maybe like here in the United States and in Europe we're like, oh, I need to go inside to see dance. But, in Brazil, it's like, I need to go outside to see dance. And I'm sure there's all sorts of different cultural reasons for that. And it's obviously not a hold and fast rule, but it's, it doesn't...
Well, and they have, as we saw the other day, they have contemporary dance in Cuba and Brazil as well, Did you see the Brazilian dance that it was on at the Schnitz not about a month ago, or in February or something? It was called
I've seen that company.
Grupo Corpo.
Yeah, I didn't see that performance of them, but it's a company that I have seen work of live before.
Yeah. So they all have their modern dance thing too.
Yeah.
And let's see, there was one thing I was gonna. Oh, we also have our street form. That who is it? Linda Johnson has done some fabulous street things, and that goes way back. Back in the 1968, I think, or 70 or something, Steve Paxton from the Grand Union came to Portland State and gave a summer workshop. And he had, we did things. But anyway, he said he wanted to have a dance happen that had 100 people in it. And he didn't necessarily want dancers. They had auditioned, got 100 people. And they were not they were everybody. And all that we did was walk across the stage. We had some instructions on a card or something, that we were supposed to stop and walk and stop and walk. But it was just all about how people walk. So this tradition of dance being for everybody has its branch in the modern dance or contemporary dance in Portland as well.
Absolutely. Wow.
And Linda Johnson has really pushed this, along for forever. She's been. Have you interviewed her?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was one of the first ones I was able to connect with.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you said that. I love contact improvisation. Steve Paxton is a bit of a.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Hero isn't quite the right word, but just an inspiring person to me. So that's really great to hear that he was here and that the dance that he did.
And he had a great influence on us because, you see now that company that we saw the other night, that was all about contact improv. That's been their main influence, and that hasn't always been in Cuba. I've done some modern dance in Cuba, or, studied some modern dance in Cuba, and that company was doing a lot more contact improv than I had ever seen before. So it's kind of come there. A lot of things come late to Cuba,
Right. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Which, of course, left their own material pristine and beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. That was interesting to see. Thank you so much for taking the time to dive into this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I had a great time. You can tell I did.